Welcome to my Commodore 64 Games memories. This is where I look at old games and some of the technical details behind them. Let's get into it. Today we have Gauntlet, published in 1986 by US Gold, developed by Gremlin Graphics, I think. The developers were Bob Armour, Bill Allen, Dave Partington, Stuart Gregg and Jason H. Perkins. The graphics were by Kevin Bulmer, and the music was by Ben Dalglish. Of course, this is the conversion of the arcade game of the same name. This is going to be quite a quick video, I think, because there's not much inside this game apart from one really interesting graphical optimization, which I will go into some detail on. When I was looking through the disk archive, I found at least 3 different versions of this disk. One of them, which seemed to be quite an early release version, had an issue with the top of the screen flickering around and moving around. So we're not going to use that version. This is the Gauntlet US Gold release from 1987. So we can see here that it's of course a bitmap, and there's no Gauntlet logo on there with the colour cycling, but I wouldn't expect it to be there. I would expect that to be sprite on top of the bitmap. We can see here that we're going back into what looks like a text screen showing all of the credits. I can see some file names there in the third screen bank on the bottom left hand corner there. So the thing about this disk is that it has an awful lot of individual files. Now I do have a breakpoint in the drive's RAM just to try and find out if we're executing any drive code, and so far the game hasn't executed any drive code whatsoever. I can see from the I/O dump for the VIC chip, the video chip basically, that we have the video memory at 6000, which we can see here, and then there is a different character set. It's not using actually a character set which is mapped to either PETSCII or screen codes or anything else like that. It's probably a slightly more optimized character set for the characters that it needs to display. We can see here the Gauntlet logo, which is not the logo that we see at the top of the screen here. It's the logo which is some colour cycled expanded sprites on top of the bitmap. The Gauntlet logo that we can see at the top of the character screen is actually in the character set here that we can see. I'm just creating a little log file, if you like, of what I'm doing here, and then I will commit this to source control, and then you can also have a look at this file to see my debugging notes. From what I remember of this game, from way back in the old days, it was actually quite easy to understand. All of the files were on the disk. There were lots of individual level files. There were individual sprite files, which was actually quite useful if I wanted to try and get sprites. I didn't have to go through any pain and suffering. I'm just making sure. There we go, you can see 143 files. Oh no, sorry, 143 blocks free on the disk, but there are like 100 files or something ridiculous like that, or over 100 files on the floppy disk. It's crazy. I think it was over 100 files. But yeah, lots of individual files, lots of some code files, bitmap data files, sprite files, character set files, all sorts of things. It made it actually quite easy to import those files into my graphics editors or somebody else's graphics editors and actually have a look. And if I remember rightly, because there was no drive code being executed, it made copying the disk really easy from the US Gold release. Now there are other releases on the disk archive, but I don't think I'll be having a look at those. One of them is using VMAX. But basically it has the same kind of directory layout. So we can see here all of the individual files that are on the disk. Level 0 to level 128. Sorry, level 1, 001 to 128. It's absolutely bonkers. So anyway, we won't spend too long looking at files on the disk at the moment. Let's go into the game. Past this screen here which says player 1, joystick 1, player 2, joystick 2. Now it loads another bitmap screen. There really is still no fast load code, no drive code loaded. No drive code executed, let's put it like that. I'm warping past some of the loads here. Now here we go. Let's try 2 players, I think. Even though it's just me, what I can do is that I can see how the player graphics are loaded. Now the players in this game, if I remember, are sprites. The rest of the enemies and everything else are character effects, or character. They're not sprites, they're character objects. So we can see a whole bunch of code being executed, or loaded, sorry. The message, the challenge awaits, is actually updated into the bitmap data itself. You can see that in the graphics map debug window. It uses the kernel to do an awful lot of loading of an awful lot of data. Now the character set, the graphics map for the character sets or the char sets debug view here, wow, it's got 4 character sets, and you can see here that the sprites for all of the characters are then loaded, and then the characters that you've chosen are then relocated into the actual correct Vic bank for being displayed. We can see here that the first 2 screen banks have some data inside it. I've started with my wizard. The level colon is actually characters, but the sprites are used for the 3 numbers of the level that you're going to. You can see the 3 number sprites, or the number sprites from 0 to 9 there in the graphics map in the sprites debug window. We can see that there's a specific block of 2x2 characters that's the same as the grey background, but basically it's the characters that signify where the player is. It's probably to make it easier to stop players from walking into each other, to be honest, or monsters from walking into you for collision detection like that. But you can see here that the characters for the ghosts are there, but the characters are not animating. I mean, they're moving, but they're not changing animation frames. And this means that these 3 character sets, look, so if I scroll through the character sets, and if you have a look at the debug view, you can see that the ghosts are animating. And it's the same for the chests, they sparkle. But yet the monster animations are using 3 full character sets. The character set of 4800 in hex, 5000 in hex, and 5800 in hex as well. So I'm just putting a little note about this in my debug log. Now this is fair enough if you think about it. I mean, the sprite frames for the player characters, that's fine, right? Because the player characters need fine control over their position on the screen, but the monsters generally you want them to scroll with the rest of the map, right? But you don't want to spend all of that extra time updating all of the characters on the screen. So all it's doing to animate is just changing one pointer to point to the different character sets. So this is actually a significant optimization, because it means as long as all of your monsters have up to 3 frames that you can bounce backwards and forwards between, or repeat, I think it's probably bouncing backwards and forwards, right? Then you just have to update one pointer in memory, as opposed to updating 1, 2, 3, 4 characters for each ghost, and then doing that for each ghost on the screen. And because there are quite a lot of monsters possible that are visible on the screen at the same time, you don't want to spend all of that time updating all of those characters all the time. So this is a very cheap way, an extremely cheap way, of doing the animation for the background level. The last character set, of course, is going to be the character set for the score panel down at the bottom. We can see that already because we can see numbers, we can see letters, we can see the Gauntlet logo. There's still no disk protection code running. I don't think this US Gold version has any protection then. There really is no code that I can see. There's no drive code that I can see. I can see the remnants of the last file that was loaded, and I can see the block allocation map, and I can see the directory in the drive's memory as I look through the memory dump, but I don't see any drive code, and no drive code is being executed because the breakpoint would have hit it. So I really do love this optimized way of animating the map. It really is fantastic. It's a good way of working within the constraints of the machine. You can see that I'm not playing this that well. So in addition to the player sprite frames, we can see that there are some sprites for what look like daggers or arrows or something, and we can also see that there are sprites for probably the fireballs that are being chucked about. We can see if the player weapons are characters or not in the debug text screen view. We can see that actually quite a lot of the default screen memory is still exists. It's not being used. I mean, there's some tables going on and stuff like that for whatever object updates, but yeah, basically that's, you know, I warped very quickly so that you could see how the player dies. So once you've chosen the characters that you want to play as, you don't get a choice to choose yet again. I think this was it's not a constraint of the disc version, but I think it might be a constraint of the tape version. The tape version, I think, if I remember rightly, there's the game over music. I think the tape version, if I remember, just asks you to rewind to the start of side B, which is, or side 2, which is where all of the level data files are. Level 1 to 128. The level data files are different sizes. It might mean that they have some kind of like compression, because the map actually is quite large when you're walking around it, so they are probably compressed in some way. There might be a way of saying, I want to draw a wall from here to here and put things here, 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 and here. And so I was just testing the other disk image, which was the VMAX 2, which was labeled as VMAX 2, and it is running drive code in that version. That's the version that was released by Mindscape in 1987, rather than the one that was released by US Gold in 1987. I'm not entirely sure what the story is behind that, but okay. I don't remember precisely which version I had. I think I probably had the US Gold release, to be honest. There's a very quick Mindscape logo, you see, before the main Gauntlet screen comes up. But I think that's pretty much the only difference. It doesn't look so different on the surface anyway. So even though this is the VMAX version, there is no drive code being executed once we get into the game proper. Kind of not surprised to be honest. I mean, the amount of different files that this game loads, it might have been a little bit of a challenge to convert it fully into a fast loaded game, I guess, within the time constraints that they had. I'm only guessing. Now I'm going to have a little look at the tape version. You can see it loads quite a lot at the beginning, and it goes into kind of like a multicolored banded turbo load, in inverted commas. It is loading some data. It's loading relatively quickly. I'm not warping at this point, so we can see that the load from tape is actually progressing in a kind of, decent speed. So it's loading. We can see actually that it's loading individual files again, and loading individual chunks of data. Sprites, the bitmap, obviously the music and the code. So this screen is different. It said leave play pressed on the tape. I'm guessing because otherwise people might decide that they just want to stop the tape once the title screen comes up, thinking that the game has loaded. It hasn't. It's got lots of different things that it loads. The player character select screen, for example. We can see it's loading the individual chunks again. Now the disk version doesn't store the player character data as 4 separate sprite files. It stores a whole great big chunk of sprites all in one great big file, and then it copies that from one place to the correct place in memory depending on the player characters that you've actually chosen. So the tape version seems to be loading all of the data that the disk version was. We can see here that actually it's loading these superfluous sprite frames that we can see there. And then those sprite frames, I'm guessing those look like the player. Those are the player weapons, of course. And then depending on which player you've chosen, it copies the weapon graphics into the correct place. You can see here that the tape version is still loading all of the character data that you would expect to see. Yes, there we go. So I guess the correct player graphics, so their weapons effects or whatever, get copied into this line just after the, I don't know, are those explosions or are they boulders that are thrown up or something like that? Probably boulders. Or maybe they're the graphics sprite animation frames. I think they're weapons. I think they look like weapons, maybe. Oh, maybe they're the sprite frames which spin around when you go down through the exit. That might be one way of doing it, right? So it says here, rewind tape to start side 2, press play, then spacebar to continue the game. Just having a look through the bitmap data that's loaded them, you can see actually that the default memory pattern is still there in the first bank. So actually there's quite a lot of unused memory when we get to this point in the game. I forgot to press space. Even though I read it out in the screen, I forgot to press space. Oops. Anyway, so once you press space, it goes into the Gauntlet press fire thing and the tape drive has stopped. Now it's loading the first level data, which looks like it was at, what was it, 1E00 onwards, and then it does some depacking or something, it initializes the map or whatever it is, and overwrites the data that was loaded. That's perfectly fine. And then we can see that we're back into the game. So file-wise, the tape version looks identical to the disk version. It doesn't look like it was optimized in any kind of way or shape or form. On an initial observation, anyway. We can see that there's the exit to level 4. Not going to do that. let's battle through all of these ghosts. I'm going to try and get to the other level exit, which I think was level 8, wasn't it? I think that's what you can do from the first level. You can, if you are really adventurous, haha, then you can decide which level you want to go through. It's kind of like a quick start, if you like. So I'm expecting that it's going to skip the level data. It's not loading anything. Now it's loading level data. I'm guessing it's got to the correct file at this point. And there we go. Level 8. I am hoping. And I think there's that, what's that? That death dark character in the middle of the level, I think, suddenly escaped, right? If I remember right. Oh, look. Oh, yes, yeah, that's not good. Let's run around. I think I'm not going to prevail here. I think I'm going to expire. So this version is missing the speech of the arcade, which was a shame. I do wonder whether or not there's enough spare memory to have some speech. A cartridge version could definitely do speech. And there we go, the tape version then, after you die, it says rewind to the start, which is where we know where the level data files are. Then press play, then spacebar. So the tape version seemed to load quite a lot of data at the beginning, probably around about 1 kilobyte, which was quite a lot for a tape turbo load. I'm just using my tape tool to have a look at what data is actually on the tap file, which is a tape file image, of course. From the original tape we can see, look, that it's actually loading quite a lot of data. If we put a breakpoint, let's put a breakpoint in the Commodore 64's memory, not the disk memory, of course, because we're loading the tape version. Yes, I forgot what device on. So we can see here, once it starts, the tape code on the C64 side at 330, as the tape tool said that it would. We can see that we've loaded quite a lot of code. There's all of that data there, and then there's all of that code, and then that superfluous data, all of those Qs at the end, look, in what is normally the default screen. But, look, the tape headers are actually blank. Why are those tape headers blank? They could have put a whole bunch of code in the tape header, and then not needed to load so much code as part of the data file. Completely crazy. So I'm going to put a note for that in my debug log as well. I mean, it's loading code at 326 anyway, so why not just tell it to execute code in the... I don't know. I mean, it would have been a lot simpler just to have a small bootloader and then quickly chain into a better turbo loader afterwards, which some games do, even if they don't want to do a turbo loader from the tape header, because there are, size constraints. It's a relatively smaller number of bytes, obviously, than the 3 full 256 byte pages that are being loaded in at that particular point in time. But hey, just have a very small bootloader which flashes the border or something, even if you want to use the ROM loader. Such is life. Anyway, so the tape version basically duplicates the file structure of the disk version. So I think we'll leave it there. This was a very short and sweet technical look at Gauntlet. The thing to note there was obviously using 3 different character sets for the animated background for the monsters and all of the pickups and everything. If you like these kind of technical deep dives into Commodore 64 games, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel, or adding a comment in the comment section below. I really do like to hear feedback from people, especially if you're one of the people that's worked on these titles or have some insight into how the disk protection works or the tape protection works, it's always very interesting to hear about that kind of thing. So thank you very much for watching. Take care. Have a great day wherever you are.